Sentinel, watching over the truth in the news.
I hope you're all well. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. So today I'm going to be joined by Anthony Kay from Almaty, Kazakhstan, our resident researcher, and also Phil Gardner, who's also joined us before in our previous episodes talking about utopia, the education system, and all kinds of things. We're going to touch on the education system again today. We're going to talk about other things like World War III. We're going to have a brief look at the news. We're also going to talk about sharks. More about that later. Our main topic, I would say, is about work. The futility of work, the slavery of work, and the education system, how it's just geared towards work. So that's going to be the main topic, but we'll be touching on some other topics as well. So settle down, relax, and enjoy today's episode. If I look at the BBC website now, there's plenty going on there. The fears grow for the European Mars lander, which has been attempting to land on Mars but has been lost. People escaping Mosul because of what's going on in Iraq there. Disposable nappy inventor dies. The UK has sent some ships to shadow the Russian naval task force, which is entering nearby waters. It sounds to me like they're all gearing up for a war, basically, with Russia.
Do you think?
Yeah, no, I really do think so, honestly. Yeah, I think they are. I think we're going to have a war. At least they're going to try. I think the public is so against that kind of thing that maybe there'll be a real backlash. But I think this is why I think they'll create an event. I think they'll create an event which they always do with these wars. They'll create an event that gets everyone behind it, like saying, "Oh my God, we have to have a war." You know, that's what they usually do. But it just seems to me that just so many things are gearing towards a war with Russia now in Syria. They wanted it last year. No, they wanted it in 2014 when they started talking about the chemical attack and they crossed a line. And the public backlash then was just like they could see they weren't going to get away with it. So then they went with ISIS, like, you know, all these brutal things that ISIS are doing. And I think, I really do believe that's what they want. They want a war because a lot of people benefit economically because of it. That's just my opinion. I'm not the only one. I think there's a lot of things happening around the world that just seem to be pointing in that direction, you know. With Germany, for example, telling all their citizens to stock up and things like that.
Really?
Yeah, they've been telling their citizens to stock up on supplies and things like that in case of a disaster, you know. It's like, these are all just kind of little things. It's like, that I think they all know. They've probably all met and organised the whole event already, you know.
Oh, could be.
I hope I'm wrong anyway, but yeah, soon find out. Yeah, so there's that going on the news. The top 10 stories are, oh my God, I can't believe that's the number one story. So I think I misread it, so it's okay. Handsome Pakistani, I read Chihuahua, but it said Handsome Pakistani Chowwala turns model. So I presume that's a woman who's turned model. I thought it said Chihuahua. So that would have been crazy. My father injected me with HIV when I was a baby. That's number 7. Which country really has the cleverest students? That's number 8. That kind of ties in with we're talking about. I just think it's the whole thing. Me and Phil have talked about this before, the education system. It's just so, I would say it's 85% just geared towards making good workers, making a good task force for work.
There is a lot of new awareness about this that I keep coming across. Like, I don't know if you've heard of Prince Ear. He does a lot of things on Facebook and these kind of hip hop songs on Facebook about current issues, I guess. And he did one recently about the education system where he took the school system to court. And
I saw that. Yeah.
It was kind of nice to see. I mean, it's not my cup of tea. That, I don't know, that sort of kind of popularizing stuff like this. But I thought, oh man, that really gets it into the mainstream. Like, and he had millions and millions of views on that.
But yeah, I did see that. I don't know. I did listen to most of that about his chat about. I find some of those things annoy me on the. You know, those kind of slightly contrived internet videos that you get with people like him. I haven't seen much more of his stuff. I mean, it was so many good points. It's like I agree with all the points, but I don't know. I just find them sometimes the way they present it is just kind of irritating. It's Probably just me, by the way.
They annoy me in the same way that, for example, like a particular type of music, for example, that's not popular at one point, later on becomes popular, and then suddenly it gets everywhere. Or a particular sort of genre of films, or I mean, look at the zombie craze. Like that was a kind of niche market in the filming industry 20 or 30 years ago, and then it suddenly, just more recently, kind of it went everywhere. Like everyone was doing films about zombies or something about zombies, games about zombies, and I think it's that sort of. Sometimes it gets me. It's like feeling like everyone's jumping on the bandwagon, but then I feel a bit arrogant for thinking that, because it's good to have this stuff in the mainstream. It's good to have this awareness raising factor about it, so that the masses become more conscious of something that's actually really important.
Yeah, very true. I just find some of the people that go on YouTube and do their presentations, I just find them kind of annoying. Because they have a kind of style. They all kind of adopt a similar kind of style. Maybe there's some kind of training school for making professional YouTube videos, and they all have the same kind of persona almost. That's what I find irritating. But that's a personal thing, and I need to kind of smack myself over the head with a book or something. And
I'll do that for you when I next see you, Scott.
Thanks, Phil. I appreciate it.
Phil, I almost jumped on that particular bandwagon myself, speaking of zombies, because not only were there films and books and games and so on, there was actually an English language course book called called English for the Zombie Apocalypse.
Wow.
and I at the time when it came out, I was working in Turkey, and I saw that and I just thought, wow, that is so weird. I have to teach it. So I pitched it to my director. I pitched it to my director because we had elective subjects at our university. I pitched the zombie apocalypse as an elective subject, and apparently I'm not too bad at pitches because he agreed. But in the end, I just didn't have time to put the course plan together, you know. But Wow. So amazing, isn't it? This ESL industry, you know, it's mainly dominated by fairly established titles, but then suddenly this book turned up out of nowhere, an entire course, like taking people through functional situations, you know, how to ask for help, how to negotiate in a group, blah, 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 but all against this background of, okay, the zombies have come, we've had the apocalypse, and now we're all surviving together.
Wow. Yeah. That's fantastic.
And of course, will you guys be watching the Walking Dead when it starts again soon? Or are you not?
No.
I haven't seen any of that, actually.
Oh, I really enjoy it, actually. I think it's excellent. I guess once you start watching something like that and get into it, then.
Yeah, our friend Steve, he was watching it. He was an avid watcher, and I sort of thought I would like to get into it, but yeah, I still haven't watched a single episode.
It's pretty good, and especially the next episode is everyone's waiting for it, because somebody gets clubbed to death basically with a baseball bat, and then the last it's not very nice, of course, but in the last cliffhanger, someone gets beaten to death, and everyone's waiting to find out who it was.
Right.
So I was going to throw in something about sharks, but again, Scott, we talked about this. I don't know how you feel about.
You know how I feel about sharks, Anthony.
Yeah. But I know how you feel about sharks, but I don't know how you feel about doing an episode about sharks. How would you feel? What do you think?
I don't want to devote a whole episode to sharks, but
why not?
But we can talk about them now as a kind of smaller. Well, I tell you what. Why don't you put your case to why we should do an episode about sharks, and we'll leave it to the listeners to decide.
Ah, really? On air, you mean?
Yeah, let's do it now. Like you give us your pitch. You said you're good at pitches, and we can say to the listeners, do you want this episode on sharks? And if even one person writes back and says yes, then we'll do it. Yeah? That doesn't mean you're allowed to get a friend to write in, Anthony.
All right. Sure.
Okay. Yeah. So why should we do an episode on sharks?
Well, look, I wanted to briefly mention a few days ago, video hit the internet of a shark entering a cage.
Right, pitch is over. Pitch is over. What do you think, Phil?
I didn't get to hear any of it. I wanted to hear about the shark entering the cage. What happened?
We'll give him a bit longer then.
So there was this boat out, one of these dodgy adventure tour companies. There was this boat out off the coast of Mexico with the shark cages off the side. And a great white entered one of the cages, and it took them a few seconds to even realize that the great white was in there. And then when they realized that the shark was in there, amazingly, the shark had basically already escaped the cage, but had injured itself in the process and was bleeding profusely. And then you hear these tour company operators who are supposed to be responsible for the safety of their clients. You hear these operators saying, "Was there anyone in that cage?" And they actually had no idea if anyone was in there or not for a few seconds, and then finally they worked it out. No, everything's okay. Just by pure luck, they hadn't stuck anyone in the particular cage they had a couple of cages. They hadn't stuck anyone in the particular cage that the shark broke into. But the shark was clearly injured, and yeah, I mean, they'd obviously been attracting it because they usually throw chum or something into the water around those boats to make sure they do get a sighting. So yeah, I don't know. It was a really dramatic video, and the sort of the purpose of it. I mean, it was on the BBC, for example, and I think the purpose of putting it on the BBC was to have some lurid images of scary great white shark breaking into a cage, But in fact, that's really, I mean, that is really dodgy of the BBC to do that, because, I mean, we're 40 years beyond Jaws. The author of Jaws. Do either of you guys know anything about Peter Finchley, who wrote the novel Jaws?
I know about Jaws.
No. Okay, well, so after the novel, I mean, the novel really set off an epidemic of fear in the States and worldwide to a lesser degree. Yeah. Fear of sharks, and this is when all the nets went up around beaches and so on. But he saw, and by the way, not only did nets go up, but shark hunting increased massively after the Jaws films. And he saw the effects.
Hey, wait a minute, Anthony. I know what's going on here. You're doing the episode on sharks now, aren't you?
Well, okay, all right. I'll be quick. So basically, Finchley spent the rest of his life, or the twilight of his years, let's say. He died in 2006, I think. Trying to conserve sharks, and with some success. 2009 was actually the year of the shark internationally, but the reason why it was the year of the shark is because sharks have been massively fished, and when you tell people that tuna stocks are down, which they're down to about 10%, people panic, almost as much as they do when you tell them that the world is running out of chocolate, which it is, incidentally. But when you tell people that shark stocks are down, there's a bit of a reluctance to care because, ooh, scary sharks. But actually, we can't afford to lose them. If we lose them, then the entire balance of the oceans goes out of whack. And one of the main reasons we're losing them is because China's middle class is growing massively. It's always been a bit of a delicacy in China to have shark fin soup, and the demand for that has just gone through the roof in the last 10 years or so. And look, there aren't a lot of sharks off the coast of China. There are, however, are sharks off the coast of countries like Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, the USA, and those countries have been very slow to try and put a stop to that, though New Zealand did it a couple of years ago. But yeah, because of the emerging middle class in China, now shark fin soup is huge, and it is revolting. What I mean is the practice of shark finning is revolting. The standard way of doing it is to literally cut the fin off the shark and then throw it back into the ocean. So the shark is still living when this is done, but it can't swim. So the sharks basically slowly sink, and they're eaten alive as they sink to the ocean floor. It is really horrendous. But aside from that, it's very, very wasteful. I mean, we have to, I think, admit, whether we like it or not, I mean, it's a somewhat unpleasant admission, but we have to admit that we do use animals as resources. But, that being the case, we need to use them efficiently. And sharks, if we think of them as resources, they are amazing resources, in the sense that their skin makes incredible leather. Their meat is very useful. There's a chemical in the marrow of their bones that may be of some use fighting cancer or treating cancer patients. There's a whole bunch of stuff you can do with a shark, with a dead shark, that isn't being done. They're just being wastefully killed. And as I said, I think part of the reason why people don't care that much is because sharks have this fearsome image, but the statistics on that are huge. I mean, sharks kill 10 people maximum around the world. Even in Australia, which is kind of known for its oceans and deserts full of scary things, 3 people get attacked by sharks.
Yeah, it's not about numbers though, Anthony.
I know it's not about numbers, but let me just quote you one more number. Just before the International Year of the Shark in 2009, there was a 5-year period in which 4 people died in shark attacks in the US. In the same period, 108 people died courtesy of cows. So cows killed 108 people, sharks killed 4. And by the way, the estimate of how many sharks we kill is 11,400, not per year, but per hour. So yeah, it's an appropriate moment to bring up sharks because we are about to lose them. Some of the stocks are down to like 1%.
I wouldn't want to lose sharks. As long as they stay away from me, they're fine. They can exist. But and I think it's the great whites. That's the ones that people don't particularly like, and you're not going to get a lot of sympathy from people if people say the great numbers of great whites are going down, because they are pretty fearsome creatures. I mean, if you were to swim in a swimming pool with a couple of great whites in there, I don't think they would just come up to you and just give you start nuzzling you or anything. They are kind of scary creatures.
True. The thing is, like, there's a perception there that is just is like a stigma. And if you think about other fearsome creatures, lions, for example, elephants in Africa, most of the villagers in Africa were terrified more of elephants than almost of any other animal there. But once we started to realize, once our perception of them changed, and they were no longer like this ferocious animal that did lots of damage to crops, that killed people, did lots of damage to people's villages, we're suddenly like all sending donations to the World Wildlife Fund to save the elephants, to stop again the Chinese from making medicines from different parts of the elephant, or from making medicines from different parts of any particular animal. So our perceptions changed, and along with it the ferociousness of these animals changed. Like now we don't see so many pictures of people being attacked by lions and tigers, for example. The only pictures we see on the internet usually are lions and tigers kept in absolutely horrible conditions in places like Thailand or China, or in zoos across the world. So I think the same could be said of the sharks. We lose this sort of another animal to an ecosystem that is already kind of teetering on the balance. And yeah, if we do lose these animals, then each time we lose one, it screws something else up, and it requires more and more human intervention, more and more human resources to keep that balance going.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to see any of these animals go. And I saw this video the other day of some tigers playing in the sea, and it was just amazing. I don't know how it was set up, or whether this was some zoo that had released them. I don't know how it was organised, but it was just a group of tigers playing in the sea, and it was beautiful to watch. There's been a lot of videos of people that have obviously spent a lot of time around tigers, and they're sort of playing with them and cuddling them. I think that's what people wish some of these dangerous animals were, that you could just, go and give a tiger a cuddle and stuff, but it doesn't seem that that's naturally what's going to happen, I don't think. There's this perception that the people would like these animals to be friendly, but they're kind of not either. There is a food chain, and they are going to attack people if that's in their nature,
Yeah, and this is something else I've been learning a bit more about, is again the way an animal is brought up. And for example, I've seen dogs as when they're young being brought up to look after sheep. And usually dogs would have attacked sheep in past, depending upon their upbringing. But these dogs were brought up with the sheep, so lambs kept with the puppies, and the dogs became their guardians, so that the sheep could now kind of roam freely in an area that was possibly where they possibly get other hunters like foxes or sometimes wolves and things like that. And the dogs became the guardians for the sheep. And the same has been done with dogs and chickens, cats and chickens, lots of different kinds of animals. So it's like things can change. And I've also seen people, there was this guy, I don't remember his name, but he was absolutely fascinated by sharks, and he would actually swim with them with no protection whatsoever. He would feed them from his own hands. And
you're talking about him in the past tense, Phil. Was he eventually eaten?
He's still alive, but he had this amazing connection with sharks. You know, his whole life was about preservation of sharks, and his whole life was also about talking to people frankly about the effects of things such as Jaws. You know, the effects that film kind of had on all of these people's mindset about sharks. I don't know, it was just interesting to me to sort of see these perceptions change over time, and how our entire consciousness of one particular animal can completely disappear and become something completely new, become something completely the opposite of fear, basically.
Mm. And going back to, I think Anthony mentioned about animals as resources. I think if people did see how that's happening, I think there'd be a lot more vegetarians in the world. I saw this video of these little baby chicks on a conveyor belt, just alive, just going to be destroyed, and it's just horrific. It's like I don't think people realise that. Yeah, I mean, I don't want that to happen. I don't want. It's obviously the people in the industry don't care at all. They do see the animal as a complete resource with no feelings whatsoever. I think that's terrible. And especially the video I think you shared, Phil, was with the calves. That was just horrific as well. It's like that guy was just brutal. You know, no empathy towards the animal at all. I mean, it would be difficult to do that job and have much empathy, but to have just complete disregard. I mean, that is borderline psychopath. Yeah, that's psychopathic behaviour. Apparently, you know, psychopaths start with animals, and if you can't feel that empathy for an animal, then you're sort of borderline psychopath. It's one of the early signs. So I would think that guy is probably a good candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen similar videos of the chickens, and it was kind of like a cute little chicken Auschwitz, you know. Yeah. And when you started talking about empathy for the animal versus treating it as a resource, I immediately flipped back to the question of how the prison guards in concentration camps turn up to work every day and do their jobs. And I think in some ways it is a similar mindset that you have to get into. But people can get into that mindset. Partly I think it's inherent in every human mind. There is a part of you which can overwhelm the rest of your mind and make you switch off your normal human empathy. And part of it, I think, is the environment that you're in. Environmental factors can act to switch that empathy off. Ideologies can do that, and industries can do it too.
I think also it's perhaps a survival thing. You know, it's like a very personal sort of survival thing that, I mean, to be in any kind of war zone, for example, or anywhere that you see, any situation that you see a lot of horrific stuff, then I think as a survival mechanism, your system is going to go into a sort of fight or flight response in a way to shut down all your kind of empathic receptors or whatever parts of the brain allow you to feel for another human being or any other being. And if you don't do that, then you would go crazy. You would go completely nuts. I'm positive of that.
Yeah, and Anthony, you brought up another subject which kind of ties in with one of the subjects I wanted to talk about today, which was you talked about the guards at Auschwitz and how they just turned up for work and it was a job. And I do feel like a lot of people do that in their jobs these days anyway, that people just turn up and do their work and they don't really think about why they're doing it, and it becomes really important to them. I mean, in the UK we call them, these kind of people, jobsworths. People who kind of do their jobs, obey the rules of what they're supposed to do at work, to the point where they'll just do stuff that's kind of really annoying, but that's what they're supposed to do, so they do it. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how work and career aren't the most important things in life, and I think for some people they've become important. I've noticed it sort of recently amongst some colleagues as well, just how important their work is to them. I think they've got lost somewhere, that they think that this job is their purpose in life, and I think that's kind of dangerous when you think that the reason you're here on this planet is because of this kind of job, particularly when the job isn't particularly anything amazing. There are some jobs out there that you could argue are worth kind of getting excited about, but there's very few people doing that. There's very few people doing that kind of work. And even the ones that have got quite good jobs, I would say to them, well, if you were given the choice, you landed on Earth and you had all the opportunities in the world, would you still say, okay, I'm going to go in at 9 o'clock and do that job? That's the best thing that I could possibly do with my time. So, yeah, I thought we could just have a little bit of a chat about any feelings you have about how important career is.
Sure, yeah. And you picked a good day for this, because I had a bit of a work incident today. But I'll say for a start that I am lucky enough to be one of those people who does really enjoy the job they do, at least much of the time. Language teaching as a profession, you get to witness many people learning, and in many cases, I think people are at their best when they learn. So yeah, the numbers of people who I've had as students over the years would be in the thousands. I've been lucky enough to watch those people in the process of learning something, and I think in many ways people are at their best when they're doing that. Yeah? So that's why, I suppose that's why I love the job, but I don't love the industry because it's like so many other industries. At the ground level, where you have teachers, you have a lot of creative, lateral, interesting people. At the higher levels, essentially the entire industry is packed solid with idiots who constantly ask the people at the coalface to do unreasonable things. And the longer you stay in the industry, the more grating that becomes. And I'm sure that's the case in many industries.
Can I just comment on that? Because I think that's partly what I'm getting at. Because I agree that, teaching is actually quite satisfying, but it is those kind of mundane things which aren't important that become very important to some people. Some admin tasks or, some procedures. I find people's obsession with following these procedures that their employer has told them are important. I find it kind of annoying. It's like, this isn't really that important. Like, if you're going to do it reluctantly. Don't do it with open arms, saying, oh yes, I love these procedures. I really can't understand those kind of people. It's just like, a lot of these procedures are they're not even necessary, to be honest. I can't understand why some people are so obsessed with them.
Often I think it comes out of insecurity, and my industry, language teaching, is particularly prone to that, because there is a saying, if you can't teach, and if you can't teach English, right? And there is in my industry a widespread perception that we have to prove that we are real educators. And for many people, one way they try to prove that, these are the people who tend to be promoted, unfortunately, one way they try to prove that is by bringing down all kinds of procedures onto workers, which force them to either stay at work longer or spend less of their time doing what really matters, which is creating interesting lessons that will cause people to learn things. Because there's this sort of defensive reaction of like, look, we're real. We have a progress report over here. We have a course syllabus over here. We have all kinds of documentation that show you that we're real teachers, right? But the teachers themselves are endlessly frustrated, and a colleague, because of all of this increasing documentation, which is preventing them from doing what they really want to do, which is prepare effectively for their lessons. And a colleague of mine recently said very simply, but I think very appropriately, the best thing you can do quite often for a teacher, the best way to help a teacher is to just leave them the hell alone. I think it's very often true, but I wanted to tell you about my day. I had a bit of a discipline issue. I'm working 2 jobs at the moment, work-life balance. And one of my jobs is at a college for people in the last 2 years of high school. I'm preparing them for an international English exam. And some of these students are very motivated and some are not. I lost my temper a little bit today because there was a guy speaking over me continually through the lesson while I was trying to give instructions to the students who wanted to do the tasks we had to do. So I kind of, I disciplined him, let's say. And the students were a little shocked because they don't often get to see me in that mode of being the heavy discipline guy. And then after the lesson, several of them came up to me And they were kind of apologizing, though this was a typical boy-girl thing. It was a boy who caused the problem, but it was the girls who came up to mend the fences after the lesson. Always happens like that. So they came up to mend the fences, and in the process, one of them said, "Teacher, do you love your job?" And I was able to immediately say yes. I didn't even have to think about it. I said, yes, I love my job, right? So that is great, I think. And I don't think I think there are a lot of people who can't say that. Yeah? But it really got me thinking, because immediately I wanted to add all these qualifications. Yes, I love my job, but, and then a big list of list of caveats. Yeah. But I couldn't because A, it would have been inappropriate to share those things with a student, and B, her language level wasn't high enough to understand what I had to say anyway. So this kind of set off a little train of thought, and the train of thought went like this. Possibly the reason why I love it is that for kids like this, right, they're sitting there in their classes, in their little college, and you're saying to them, all right, let's pass this exam. Yeah? Some of them are going to use this exam perhaps to study at a university in their own country. Others might use it to help them emigrate or study abroad for a couple of years or whatever. And ultimately, what I hope that will do is give them some options. Yeah? And so if they don't take advantage of that, then the chances of them being stuck in one of these work environments where process of what they do is futile and the result of what they do is futile increase. You know, the less options they have, the more likely they're going to end up in a futile job. And it's particularly the case here in Almaty, where I live, because Almaty is the financial kind of hub of Central Asia, and there are just an inordinate number of people here who become economists and financiers.
Same as Ukraine, isn't it? All my students were becoming economists.
Yeah, and these people are, I believe that many of these people are going to get to a point in their careers where they just wake up one morning and go, oh my God, I'm an economist. What have I done with my life? Now,
and it might be 40 years into it.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are certain people in the world who will never think that, who will have enormously fulfilling careers as economists. But there's a sort of pressure here to go into that sphere. You know, I've lost count of the number of people I've met who want to be, let's say, designers or teachers or, you know, medical professionals, but there's no money here in the medical profession, or whatever, whose parents are pushing them into finance and economics. And that is a road to exactly the kind of futility that I think you're talking about. When you've got this kind of social pressure that's telling you that one job is prestigious, and then you end up sitting at a desk doing that job only because of or primarily because of the social pressures, then I think that is a recipe for disaster and depression and the feeling of futility.
And pretending that you love it as well. I think there's some people that do pretend. I mean, yeah, there are, like you said, you know, your job, there is some satisfaction, but there's a lot of people who are doing a dead-end job, which is prestigious, like you say, which, you know, everyone says, oh, you know, you've got a great job there. But it actually isn't. It's boring. They're not doing anything satisfying, but they do pretend to themselves that they love it. I think that's one danger. Another thing I think with some of these prestigious but boring jobs with no satisfaction is that you're not free. I think with a lot of these jobs, you've lost your freedom. You have to be somewhere at a certain time on Monday morning, for example, and that is a kind of slavery. I've been lucky enough to try and work my way out of that system a bit, where I've got a lot of freedom and nobody's telling me what to do. So I feel a bit more free myself at the moment. But I have been in that situation myself where I've had to be somewhere at 9 o'clock every Monday to Friday, and I think that is a kind of slavery. And I think some people are stuck in it. And I think there are people who are trying to break free from that now and get in more flexible jobs, and I think that's a good move in a positive direction, to have some flexibility so you can control your time and your life. I don't think bosses should be able to tell you that you have to be somewhere at a certain time. That really is taking over your life, you know.
I think there is a move towards flexibility and work from home and all that kind of stuff, but I think that's actually overrepresented in the media. We're talking about a slightly different media to the one we usually criticize here. We're talking about, publications like The Economist and so on, who get very excited about this kind of flexible work culture of the 21st century and so on. But I don't think it's happening to as many people as they would like to have us believe. And at the same time, you've got organizations like Amazon, and Amazon is just a terrifying organization. There was a report done last year by the New York Times into the work culture at Amazon. It really was frightening. For a start, any employee who contributed to this report was immediately in danger of losing their job because they swear their employees to secrecy. They're quite a lot like a cult in several ways, this Amazon. When people come to join, the first thing they're told, or one of the first things, is put aside the poor habits of your previous career and join us and take our laminated cards. They get little laminated cards with 14 golden rules inscribed on them. And then they get quizzed on the rules, and if they get a perfect score, they get an award. Yeah. And then they go into meetings. They get trained on how to make business meetings like adversarial kind of gladiatorial contests. There are employees of Amazon who have spoken on the condition of anonymity who say it's absolutely standard to walk out of a meeting and see men covering their eyes so that nobody can see them crying, because this is what they're trained to do, is to just tear everybody else to shreds across a boardroom.
That actually sounds quite interesting, though. I mean, most of the meetings I've been to have been so dull. I've just literally just, almost died of boredom. And occasionally, because I feel like I should make a contribution, I'll just blurt out some completely pointless question and then go back to sleep again.
Well, it may sound appealing, but I think what might sound a little less appealing is the company's expectations on their employees. They boast that their expectations are unreasonably high, and they expect their employees to be available at any time. So one of their strategies is to send an email to employees after midnight, and if they don't answer, then they'll send a follow-up text message saying, why didn't you answer your email?
Oh, that's just stupid. I mean,
yeah.
Anyone, I think, if you're listening now and you work for Amazon, and that is the case, just quit tomorrow. Okay?
Absolutely.
If we can influence one person who's living in that kind of environment to quit, then I think this will be a worthwhile chat.
Yeah, well, if they're listening to this show in the first place, they're probably going to be culled. Amazon has an annual culling of the staff. I believe they actually call it a cull. And one of their human resources directors has described it as Darwinism in the workplace. And some of the people they've culled, for example, are people who have had the audacity to admit to their employers that they have contracted cancer or had a miscarriage. They're out.
What?
But But they always, in the great tradition of management, they kind of couch all of this in this kind of beautiful, motivational sounding crap, like this. This is from a top Amazon recruiter called Susan Harker, who said, quote, "When you're shooting for the moon, the nature of the work is really challenging." And if you haven't just thrown up in your mouth a little when you heard that, you may be a victim of one of these corporations.
I'm going to come at this from a slightly different perspective or direction. Like I was thinking about, like what you were saying was important in life, for example. So for me, some of the things that come to mind when I think about that is relationships, your relationships with people around you, your relationship with the environment that you live in, that kind of thing. Creativity, happiness, love, and fulfillment. But there are also all these needs as well that we have, and one of the basic ones is survival. So I was talking a little bit about the sort of survival thing in human beings in our previous discussion, and I was thinking this is what work is for so many people. They don't think about what's really important in life because their mindset is all geared towards surviving. Like, I need to make some money, I need to have a home to live in, and I need to pay for that home. They might have a family that they need to provide for. All of these things which will have been handed down to them through their parents and through all the adults around them as they grew up. So they don't have the chance, they don't have the opportunity to think about what is actually really important in life, that they're only here for a limited period of time, and what would they like to do with that time? When we kind of have all our needs met, so your survival needs are met, your needs for food, your needs for clean water, your need for shelter, and so on, when all of that is met, then your mind can be free to start thinking about other stuff, like, what would I really like to do with my day? How can I be happy? What sort of relationships would I like? All of the more pleasurable things in life. But until those needs are met, you don't get a chance to. And not only that, our mindsets, for many people, their mindset is so focused on survival because of patterns of fear in life. So if you have all of these patterns of fear running as a program in your mind, freedom is the last thing you really want, because it's actually quite scary to make choices and decisions for yourself. So it's much easier to let someone else make those decisions for you, to tell you, to structure your day, basically. So this is kind of an answer to what you were asking about before, Scott, that you said, like, you don't understand how these people can love the bureaucracy in their job, for example, the administration and this sort of thing, and telling people like when to turn up to their job on time. These people have to love it because they need to find some sort of fulfillment one way or another in their life. And so the fulfillment has already been prescribed for them by their boss. And it comes in the package of, their job.
And that's a scary thought, that actually the slavery I see, and the kind of, the fact that people aren't living fulfilled lives, for them, they feel like they are. But I still feel that they're not. So it's kind of, it's a difficult thing if that kind of satisfies them, because they need that. They're too scared of experiencing, of actually making decisions about what they really want in life and taking risks. I think there is some risks to be taken. Because if you do reject your highly paid job, you are going to have to make some sacrifices. But I think in the end, you'll end up actually happier. When you've got control of your life, when you're doing something more satisfying, but you've got less money, you're going to be much happier than if you've got lots of money, but you've sacrificed your health and your freedom and things like that.
And that's what I meant by the fear aspect of it. There's a lot of fear in facing an unpredictable life, and life is unpredictable. It's going to throw lots of things at you, and part of the enjoyment, I think, in life is how we deal with with that unpredictability. And that's why I think, Anthony, what you said earlier about the fulfillment you get out of seeing people learn and knowing that people are at their best when they learn, I think is so true. Because when we're learning, it's like we're opening up our horizon. We're opening up all the boundaries that we have around us in our own minds, and sort of creating an entire new world in a way through just learning even one new concept each day or something like that. And that's where the fulfillment in life actually comes.
I think you're right about fear, I think there's one particular kind of fear which motivates a lot of people, which is the sort of mummy fear. So there's this kind of overarching idea for a lot of people that they need to work harder to provide better for their kids. Yeah. And I think that's in some ways getting worse because the education system is becoming, how can I say, it's becoming more competitive in a way. Like the idea of I think there are more pushy parents in the world now than perhaps there used to be, who are sending their kids off to different kinds of classes and other things every night of the week. And I think they're doing that not because they want to get their kids out of the house, but because they feel like they need to give their kids a competitive advantage in life. And that all costs money, which means they need to stay at work for longer hours to make sure they're not, to make sure they're a diligent mum. This kind of mummy fear I think it's a really insidious kind of force in society. You even see it in the supermarket. If you go to the supermarket and you pick up pick up a cake of soap for adults, or no, better example, pick up a packet of washing powder for adults and then a packet of washing powder for babies. You will find the price differential is at least 200%. And it's playing on this mummy fear. If you don't spend this extra money on your baby, then you're a neglectful parent, right? On your baby, on your child. But actually, one of the regrets, which I think is most commonly reported among people who have adult children, is that they didn't spend more time with their children when they were growing up. And in many cases, the reason why they didn't spend more time with their children is because they were at work trying to provide all the things that advertisers and other mums and so forth are telling them they need to provide to the children. Everything from the washing powder to the guitar classes. They need to go away from the people they love in order to somehow give the people they love some kind of abstract advantage in life. And then the people they love grow up without them. Yeah, I think it's a really kind of dangerous trend. It's always been there, but it seems to be particularly trending at the moment.
Yeah.
Can I just add a quote just to make this sound more academic?
Sure.
The term career is nothing more than a fancy linguistic trick designed to make you believe that what you're doing is more meaningful than it is. That's from the middlefingerproject.org. I don't know what they I don't actually know what they do, but I quite like the name of their website, the middlefingerproject.org, because I feel like sticking a middle finger up towards career and education because I think it's so seriously flawed.
Another thing I would add is like our concept of work. You know, we have different definitions of what work is, and for some people it is this idea of career. For other people it's just a chore. It's something that requires a lot of effort to get up on a Monday morning, go to a place of work that you don't really like. Having to just travel to work, to commute, is like an incredible waste of life, if you ask me. You think about over the space of 30 or 40 years of someone's career, how much time they spend on a train or on a bus or any
I think people should actually get paid for that as well, because that's a liberty I think that's been taken by employers, because that period of time, say they're travelling for an hour, that is not what they'd be doing if they weren't working. They would not be sitting there travelling to work. So I think they should be paid for that as well.
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen somehow.
Not going to happen, but I think it should.
And one other definition of work would be, I wouldn't even call it work. I've done a lot of work. I'm unfortunate enough, as with most people in the world, to have had to work for money at some point in my life. But more recently, especially for the last few years, I've volunteered more than so. I've still needed money, but it's come in the form of food and accommodation. So my time has been voluntary, but in return, I've been provided with my needs, my basic needs, and the rewards of that have been incredible, because I was working in a children's home in Asia for several years, and this kind of goes into what you were saying, Anthony. Like, I spent more time with those children, and even though in a way it was work, I mean, I was working hard most of the time, sort of 14 hours a day, because we were doing everything from cooking, cleaning, teaching the kids, just normal childcare, and then working on a farm and working with all the admin that went along with a small charity. And yet it was incredibly rewarding in terms of the time, the quality time I spent with the kids themselves, the relationships that I built up around the sort of the place of work and all of the volunteers that came to work with us and so on. And I mean, there was a lot of fulfillment that came out of that, a lot of relationship, a lot of creativity, a lot of fun, a lot of happiness, and a lot of love, which were all of those things actually that I'd sort of mentioned earlier as some of the important things in life. And there was no money involved.
Well, it's interesting you should mention that. I think for a lot of people that have the kind of office jobs that we're slightly dissing here, one of the things that does make it bearable, and not just bearable, but I think in many cases very enjoyable, is that camaraderie you get by being thrown into almost a random room with a bunch of people you would never have otherwise met, and suddenly, like, they're your guys. You know, you're out with them on a Friday night, you're gossiping with them, you know, over lunch or whatever. So even in the blandest job, you can find, I suppose, a social outlet, and a means of meeting people who you would never otherwise meet and finding out about people you would never otherwise have found out about. I remember one job I did, which was a soul-destroying job, way back in the day when I was a graphic designer, which, if anyone is thinking it's a good profession, it's not. But way back in the days of being a graphic designer, I happened to get sat next to the accountant for this small charity that I was working for. And the accountant was fascinating. A 60-year-old woman called Rosie, who, I mean, when you saw her walk into the building, you would think, okay, butter wouldn't melt in this woman's mouth. She was just the most prim and kind of uptight person you could ever meet, was the first impression. But I spent maybe a year sitting adjacent to her, and I've rarely laughed so much in my life. She was an absolute scream, and she was just such a great person to have met in my life. And so I suppose, I mean, you increase your chances of that if you do work that is, I suppose, meaningful, quote unquote, like working with people who need your help, who are on some actual mission as opposed to just accountants. But even Rosie the accountant brought some joy to my life. So I suppose that is one reason to get up and go to the job.
And the coffee, of course.
And the coffee.
That's what I like to see is the benefits behind certain things that seem completely dark in this world, and like we're talking about this sort of standard office job kind of type work and careers and so on, and how much of a waste of time they are. But on the flip side, there's something else that people are getting out of it. It's not just the survival stuff. It's not just to be able to keep them alive, but it's teaching them something that they would never actually get the opportunity to learn otherwise. Teaching people about human nature, I guess, and about their own prejudices, about our just the way we perceive other people, and all of the patterns that we get kind of drilled into us over the span of our lifetimes. And that was a perfect example, Anthony, of the first impression not actually revealing what was really truly inside this lady. And you mentioned about more fulfilling jobs. You kind of perhaps get even more of that. Well, actually, I've been in fulfilling jobs where I've seen a lot of pretension and people who just weren't really themselves. They still hadn't found themselves. And yet this is my worst job that I've ever been in, the most soul-destroying job, which was in a sandwich factory in Southampton, and I stood in front of a conveyor belt, and I was in charge of lettuce, and a couple of pieces of bread would pass by on the conveyor belt every few seconds, and I would put a piece of lettuce on that piece of bread that had previously been buttered by someone else, and was afterwards going to be given a piece of ham or a piece of cheese or whatever. And I stood there for hours on end with 2 15-minute breaks and a half-hour break for lunch, and it was terrible. But the people there were absolute kind of salt of the earth, we would say. They were very down to earth, and their resilience, their ability to just deal with that monotony was incredible. There was an inherent kind of creativity that came out in those people to be able to deal with something absolutely mundane, the most mundane thing you could ever think about, just staring at a conveyor belt going by with pieces of bread on it.
Did you get free sandwiches, Phil?
No, you didn't. What we did get is a free hairnet and free bags to go over your shoes.
And do you still wear them?
I do to bed every day.
I was going to mention that is just an incredible job experience, I have to say. I was going to ask you, how did you not kill yourself?
So, thanks for listening to today's show. Let us know what you think about work and career. Do you agree with some of the things that have been said or strongly disagree? Let us know. You can leave a voicemail at www.truthsentinel.co.uk. Do you want an episode on sharks? Anthony's interested in doing one. I'm not so sure, but I'm totally open to it. Also, let us know what topics you'd like us to talk about, and if you have any recommendations for guests. We'll be getting some more guests on soon, of course. Thanks for listening to today's show, and I hope you'll tune in next week. Remember, you can find us at www.truthsentinel.co.uk. That's www.truthsentinel.co.uk. and I've put up the latest episodes, some more on the way, so it's always worth checking out that website, and also going to our YouTube channel, Truth Sentinel with Scott. There's 2 channels actually, Truth Sentinel with Scott 1 and Truth Sentinel 2. Try and find them and subscribe as well so you get all our episodes. Also on the website you can find t-shirts at trutht-shirts.com, and if you use the code TRUTH1 you'll get a 10% discount and we get a small donation from that company. Remember, if you're in a dead-end job and there's any way you can get out of it, even if you have to make sacrifices and take a pay cut, try and do it. It'll be worth it, I promise you. We only have one life and we should fill it with experiences, not with work. If you do have to work, try and have a bit of fun there and don't take it too seriously, whether you're working or not. I hope you have a good week, and I hope that you'll join us in our next episode. Thanks again. Thanks. Goodbye.